Once every year, the town of Riverford came alive with its grand music competition. It wasn't a big city event with cameras and luxury, but for the people who lived there, it was the most awaited day of the year. The old community hall, which usually stayed quiet and empty, would suddenly fill with shining lights, music notes, laughter, and excitement. Families from all around would come to watch their children play the piano, violin, or sing in front of a panel of judges. It was more than just a contest. It was where dreams were tested. That morning, the hall was already full by 9 o'clock. The smell of polished wood and freshly printed music sheets filled the air. Parents were busy helping their children fix their collars and calm their nerves. The judges, 3 well-known local musicians, sat behind a long table, whispering among themselves as they flipped through their notes. They looked serious, ready to test every contestant who dared to sit before them. The competition that year had one challenge that stood above all: a piano piece so difficult that even the most experienced players feared it. It was fast, filled with sharp turns and jumps demanding absolute control and emotion. The piece was famous for breaking the confidence of even seasoned pianists. The judges chose it as a way to separate the true talents from the ones who were simply skilled. One by one, contestants went up on stage. Some managed to play half the piece before missing a note. Others played well but lacked feeling. A few stopped halfway, their hands trembling. The judges listened carefully, occasionally writing something down but mostly looking disappointed. The audience clapped politely after each performance, but deep down, they knew no one had truly mastered it yet. By the time the morning turned into afternoon, the air inside the hall felt heavy. The judges sighed. They had expected at least one perfect performance, but so far none had even come close. Then the announcer stepped forward holding a list of names. "Next contestant," he said, glancing at the paper. "Lily, 8 years old." A low murmur ran through the audience. Some laughed softly, thinking they had heard it wrong. An 8-year-old in a competition like this? Surely it was a mistake. The judges looked at each other, half amused, half curious. From the side of the stage, a small figure appeared. She was tiny, her hands clutching a small notebook, her shoes making light sounds on the wooden floor. She wore a plain white dress that looked slightly too big for her, and her hair was tied neatly into a ponytail by a red ribbon. She looked nervous but determined. As she reached the piano, she gave a small bow. Her eyes scanned the crowd, then settled on the black and white keys in front of her. The piano seemed huge compared to her small frame. One of the judges leaned forward, trying not to smile. The announcer whispered to another judge, "She's the youngest participant ever." The judges didn't expect much. They assumed she might play a simple tune or maybe a slower version of the required piece. One of them even picked up his coffee cup, preparing for what he thought would be a cute but forgettable attempt. But Lily didn't touch the keys yet. She sat still for a few moments, adjusting the bench carefully. Her small feet couldn't reach the pedals, but she seemed to know exactly where to sit. The crowd grew quiet, some leaning forward to see what she would do. In the back row, a woman whispered to her husband, "Poor child. She must be scared," but the truth was, Lily wasn't scared. She was nervous, yes, but not frightened. She had been dreaming about this day for months. Every night after school, she would sneak into her small living room where an old upright piano stood. It wasn't fancy. A few keys were chipped and the sound wasn't perfect, but it was her world. That piano was where she poured her heart out, trying to copy songs she heard on the radio or online. Her father had found it at a thrift store and brought it home when she turned 6. Since then, the instrument had become her best friend. She had never had a teacher. Her father worked long hours and lessons were expensive. So Lily taught herself. She watched videos, listened carefully, and practiced until her small fingers ached. Sometimes she would play until she fell asleep on the bench. Her father often found her there, still holding the sheet music she could barely read. Today, all those nights had led to this moment. As Lily placed her hands over the keys, the judges noticed something change in her expression. Her eyes, which had looked shy before, now seemed steady, almost glowing. It was as if she had entered another world, one where only she and the piano existed. The crowd held its breath. The hall became so quiet that even the faint ticking of the old clock could be heard. One judge cleared his throat softly, waiting for her to begin. Lily closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her fingers moved, gently at first, almost like a whisper. A few soft notes filled the air, fragile but precise. The melody began to build, and soon it was no longer a child's performance. Each sound carried weight and feeling, every note flowing into the next like a story being told without words. People looked at one another surprised. The judges put down their pens, drawn in by the unexpected beauty of her playing. Her hands moved gracefully, not fast but confident, with purpose. The difficult parts of the piece, the same ones that had caused others to stumble, seemed effortless under her touch. It wasn't just her skill. It was the emotion behind it. There was something haunting and deep in her music, something far beyond her age. It was as if she was not just playing notes but speaking from her heart. Her father sat quietly in the last row, tears forming in his eyes. He knew how hard she had worked. He remembered the nights when she cried because she couldn't get the rhythm right, the times she refused to eat until she could play one section perfectly. Now, watching her perform under those bright lights, he realized she wasn't just playing, she was living her dream. The performance ended after a few minutes, though to everyone it felt like seconds. The final note hung in the air, slowly fading away. For a moment, no one clapped. They were too stunned. Then the hall erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering. The judges exchanged glances, unsure what to write on their papers. Lily turned toward them, gave a shy smile, and bowed again. Her cheeks were pink and her small hands trembled slightly, but she looked happy. She had done what she came to do. After she walked off the stage, one of the judges leaned back and whispered, That was something special." Another nodded. "I didn't expect that from her." The competition continued, but it felt different now. The judges compared every other performance to hers, and none seemed to shine the same way. She had changed the atmosphere. She had made everyone believe again. That night, after the contest ended, Lily and her father walked home under the streetlights. She held her small trophy close to her chest. It wasn't the grand prize, but it was more than enough for her. "Did I do okay, Papa?" she asked quietly. Her father smiled, placing his hand on her shoulder. "You didn't just do okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "You made them listen." She looked up at him, confused. "Listen to what?" "To you," he said. "Not just your music and you." That night, as she went to sleep, the echoes of the applause still played in her ears. For her, the stage wasn't about winning or losing. It was about proving that even a small voice could fill an entire hall. And though she didn't know it yet, that performance was only the beginning. People in the audience had recorded her on their phones. By the next morning, her video would start spreading, capturing the hearts of millions who would soon know her name. The little girl who made a hall full of skeptics believe in miracles again. But at that moment, as she drifted into sleep with tired hands and a happy heart, she only thought of one thing: the piano waiting for her in the living room, and the songs she hadn't learned yet. The next morning, Riverford woke up to whispers that spread faster than anyone could believe. People who had been at the hall the night before couldn't stop talking about the little girl who played the impossible piano piece. At the bakery, at the bus stop, and even at the school gate, her name came up again and again. "Did you see that child?" one woman asked another. 8 years old, and she played like she was born for it. By noon, someone had already uploaded a short clip of her performance online. The video showed her tiny hands gliding over the keys with confidence and grace. It wasn't filmed professionally, just from a phone, but it didn't matter. The sound of her playing was enough to stop people mid-scroll. Within hours, it had thousands of views, but Lily had no idea any of this was happening. She was back at school, sitting quietly at her desk, pretending to listen to her teacher talk about fractions. Her mind kept replaying the moment she had sat at that piano. She could still hear the sound of the first note echoing through the hall. Every time she thought about it, her stomach fluttered. It didn't feel real. When she came home that afternoon, her father was waiting for her at the small kitchen table. He had his phone in his hand and a wide grin on his face. "You need to see this," he said, turning the screen toward her. Lily tilted her head. It was a video, her video. Someone had filmed her performance. She could see herself sitting at the piano, her hands moving across the keys like they had a life of their own. Her heart skipped a beat. "People are talking about you," her father said. "You're all over the internet." She frowned, confused. "Why? Because you did something amazing?" She shook her head. "I just played." Her father smiled softly. "Sometimes that's all it takes." He hugged her tightly, and though Lily didn't quite understand how big it all was, she felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She had never been noticed before. For years, she was just another quiet girl who liked music. Now suddenly, people were calling her a genius. That evening, her father's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted to talk to her. Local music teachers wanted to meet her. Even a few big city schools had sent emails offering scholarships. Her father read them out loud in disbelief. "They're saying they'll give you lessons for free," he said. "They think you have real talent." Lily looked up from her piano, her fingers resting gently on the keys. "Do you think I'm good enough?" she asked softly. Her father sat beside her. "You were good the moment you started playing," he said. "You just needed the world to hear it." Over the next few days, everything changed. Their small, quiet home became a busy place. Journalists came with cameras, teachers came with offers, and neighbors stopped by just to shake Lily's hand. At first, it felt exciting. She smiled shyly when people called her a prodigy, but after a while it became a bit too much. She missed the peace of sitting alone at her piano. Now every time she tried to practice, her father's phone would ring, or someone would knock at the door. Even at school, things were different. Her classmates looked at her with a mix of admiration and jealousy. Some congratulated her, while others whispered that maybe it was luck. During lunch one day, a boy said, "My dad says that piece you played is impossible. Did your dad help you cheat?" Lily blinked, not sure how to respond. "You can't cheat music," she said quietly. The boy shrugged. Still, no one believes an 8-year-old could do that. She didn't say anything more. But that night, when she sat down to play, her hands felt heavier than usual. For the first time, she started doubting herself. A few days later, her father received a call from the competition organizers. The judges wanted to see her again. They were curious, and maybe even skeptical. They wanted her to play the same piece, this time in a private session where they could watch closely. Her father looked at her gently. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," but Lily nodded. "I want to." When they arrived at the music hall again, it was quieter than before. No crowd this time, just the 3 judges sitting behind their table. The head judge, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted her warmly. "Hello, Lily," he said. "We were very impressed with your performance. We'd like to hear it again, just to understand your technique better. Is that okay?" She nodded, though she could feel her heartbeat quicken. She walked to the same piano she had played before. It felt familiar, yet somehow heavier now, as if it remembered the pressure of that first night. She sat down and took a deep breath. The judges whispered quietly to each other, then signaled for her to begin. For a moment, everything around her disappeared. She could no longer hear their voices or feel their eyes watching her. All she could think about was the sound, the rhythm, the melody, the story behind every note. Her fingers began to move, and just like before, the room filled with music. The same passion, the same grace, but this time there was something deeper. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply letting the music flow through her like it was coming from somewhere inside her heart that words could never reach. When she finished, the room fell silent. The judges looked stunned again. The silver-haired man finally spoke. "You played perfectly," he said. "No mistakes. No hesitation." Another judge leaned forward. "Did someone teach you this piece?" Lily shook her head. "I watched videos and listened until I understood it." The woman on the panel gasped softly. "By ear?" She nodded again. "Music tells me what it needs. I just listen." For a long time, none of them spoke. Then the head judge smiled. "You have a gift, young lady. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt it." As they left the hall, her father's eyes were shining. "I told you," he said. "You just needed to let them hear you." That night, the organizers released an official statement confirming that her performance had been genuine. That made the video spread even faster. Within a week, it had millions of views. People from different countries were commenting, sharing, and calling her the miracle girl of Riverford. But while the world saw a rising star, Lily still saw herself as the same little girl sitting at her old piano. She still practiced in her living room, still played with her cat sitting beside her, still forgot to eat when she got lost in the music. Then one evening, a letter arrived. A real paper letter, not an email. It was from a famous music academy in the city. They wanted to meet her and give her a chance to perform at a national concert. Her father read it out loud twice just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. "This could change everything," he said quietly. Lily looked at him, unsure. "Do I have to go far away?" "Only if you want to," he said. "You're still a child. You don't owe the world anything." She thought for a long time before answering. "I just want to play. If I can do that, I'll go." The trip to the city was the longest journey she had ever taken. They rode a bus for hours, watching the scenery change from quiet green fields to tall glass buildings and noisy streets. When they reached the academy, she felt small again. Everything around her looked enormous. The gates, the marble floors, the grand pianos lined up in perfect rows. The teachers welcomed her kindly. They had already watched her video and couldn't wait to see her in person. They led her to a concert room with a beautiful black grand piano shining under the lights. It was far bigger than any she had played before. A man in a neat suit said, "Play whatever feels right to you." She took a deep breath and sat down. This time she didn't play the difficult piece everyone expected. Instead, she began a simple melody she had written herself, soft, gentle, and filled with emotion. It wasn't about showing skill. It was about showing who she was. When she finished, the teachers were quiet. Then one of them clapped slowly. "That," he said, "is what real music feels like." Her father stood at the back of the room, smiling proudly. He had always believed that her heart spoke louder than her hands ever could. As they left the academy later that evening, the city lights sparkled all around them. Lily looked up at the tall buildings and said softly, "Papa, do you think Mom would have liked my song?" He paused, his throat tightening. "She would have loved it," he whispered. Lily smiled, holding his hand tighter. "Then I'll keep playing, until she can hear it wherever she is." That night, as their bus drove back toward their small hometown, Lily leaned against her father's shoulder and closed her eyes. The road hummed beneath them like a faint rhythm, almost like a lullaby. She didn't know what the future held, concerts, lessons, fame, or maybe just more practice at home, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling she got every time her fingers touched the keys, the way the world seemed to disappear, and the way her heart spoke when words failed. Outside, the moon followed the bus quietly. Somewhere deep inside, Lily knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than she could imagine. But for now, she was just a little girl who loved to play, and that was more than enough. That evening, after they returned from the city, the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and purple. Lily sat by the window, her small notebook open on her lap. The sound of crickets filled the air as the sun disappeared behind the hills. She had spent the entire day thinking about what had happened at the music academy, the big hall, the shining piano, and the kind teachers who had listened to her play so carefully. Everything felt unreal, as if she had stepped into a dream. Her father was sitting at the kitchen table reading the letter they had been given before leaving the academy. The paper looked official with fancy writing and a golden seal. "They want you to join their music program," he said softly. "It's one of the best in the country. You'd learn from great teachers and play in big concerts." Lily looked at him with wide eyes. "But it's far away, right?" He nodded. "Yes, it's in the city. You'd have to stay there for a while." She lowered her gaze. The thought of leaving her home scared her. She loved the quiet streets, her small school, and her old piano that sat near the window. The city felt loud and busy, full of people who looked too serious to stop and listen. Her father seemed to understand what she was thinking. He reached over and gently touched her hand. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it," he said. "You've already done something incredible. No one can take that away from you." Lily nodded slowly. "Can I still play here?" "Of course," he said with a smile. "As long as you keep playing, the world will always find a way to listen." Later that night, after her father went to sleep, Lily sat at her piano. The moonlight fell softly across the keys, making them shine faintly. She placed her fingers on them and began to play a melody she had been creating in her mind for days. It started soft like a whisper, then slowly grew stronger as if telling a story. She imagined herself back at the music academy, surrounded by people who didn't know her yet believed in her music. The sound filled the small room, and though no one else was there, she felt as if someone was listening. Maybe her mother, watching from somewhere far above. When the last note faded, she looked up at the picture frame on the wall, an old photo of her parents taken before her mother had passed away. "I hope you heard that," she whispered. The next morning brought another surprise. The local news station came to their house. A young reporter stood outside with a camera crew, asking her father if they could interview Lily. Her father hesitated, but Lily shyly agreed. She had never been on camera before, and her voice trembled as she answered their questions. Can you tell us how you learned to play such difficult music? The reporter asked. Lily smiled softly. I just listen to how it feels, she said. Music talks if you let it. Her answer made everyone smile. It was simple yet full of truth. When the interview aired that evening, it melted hearts all across the region. People called the news station, asking if there would be a concert where they could hear her play again. Her father received more letters, invitations, gifts, even handwritten notes from people who said her story gave them hope. But not everything felt easy. Fame, even small-town fame, brought its own weight. Some people started questioning her talent. A few music teachers claimed that what she did couldn't be real, that maybe her video had been edited or that she was just lucky that one time. One morning, her father came across an article online where a famous pianist had written, "It is not possible for an 8-year-old to play that composition with full precision. There must be some trick behind it." He closed the laptop quickly, hoping Lily wouldn't see it. But she did. When she read those words, her heart sank. For the first time, she felt small again. The same people who praised her now doubted her. She sat quietly by the piano that evening but didn't play. Her fingers hovered over the keys, then dropped to her lap. Her father came to sit beside her. "You read it, didn't you?" She nodded without speaking. He sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. Some people find it hard to believe in what they can't do themselves. Don't let that steal your love for music, Lily bit her lip. But what if they're right? What if I just got lucky? He turned her to face him. You practiced for years. Luck doesn't sound like what you played that night. She looked at the piano again. Then how do I show them? He smiled gently. You don't have to show them. Just keep playing. The right people will always hear the truth. Over the next few weeks, Lily focused again on her music. She began learning new pieces, not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to grow. Her father noticed how her confidence slowly returned. The sparkle in her eyes came back every time she played something new. One afternoon, while she was practicing, the phone rang again. Her father picked it up and listened carefully. When he hung up, he looked both excited and nervous. They want you to perform at the National Music Festival next month, he said. Lily's hands froze above the keys. The big one. With all the real musicians? Yes, he said with a smile. They saw your video. They want you to open the event. Her heart started racing. The National Music Festival was a huge event broadcast on television across the country. People from around the world would be watching. It was a chance of a lifetime, and also a heavy responsibility. For days after that, Lily practiced from morning until night. She played until her fingers felt sore, but she didn't complain. Every note mattered. Every pause, every movement, she wanted it all to be perfect. Sometimes she would stop and look out the window, imagining the crowd she would soon face. She wondered if they would believe in her music or doubt her like some had before. But then she remembered her father's words, "Play for the ones who listen with their hearts." Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The hall was far larger than the one in her hometown. The ceiling was high, covered in golden lights, and the stage shone under a wide spotlight. Rows and rows of seats stretched out before her, filled with people in elegant clothes. Some were musicians, some critics, and some were simply music lovers waiting to hear something unforgettable. Backstage, Lily waited with her father. She held his hand tightly, her small fingers cold with nerves. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, though her heart was pounding. "I think so." When her name was called, she walked out slowly, her white dress brushing against her shoes. The hall fell silent. People turned to see the little girl they had heard so much about. She sat at the piano and took a deep breath. The lights were warm on her face. She could barely see the audience, but she could feel their eyes on her. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes floated through the hall like a soft breeze. The melody grew, twisting and turning, climbing to places that made even the most experienced musicians lean forward in awe. Every movement of her fingers told a story, of patience, struggle, and a love that never gave up. The piece she chose wasn't the same one from the competition. It was harder, deeper, and full of emotion. She had practiced it every night, imagining that her mother was listening somewhere out there. As she reached the final passage, something magical happened. Her fingers moved so fast and yet so gracefully that the audience held their breath. The music seemed to lift the entire hall into silence. Then came the last note, soft, delicate, and pure. It lingered in the air before fading away. For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause erupted, loud and endless. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Lily looked up, startled. Tears filled her eyes. She had done it. Not for fame, not for applause, but for herself, for her father, and for the memory of her mother. When she turned to leave the stage, the head of the festival walked toward her with a smile. "You have reminded us all why music exists," he said. "It's not about skill or age. It's about heart." Her father was waiting just behind the curtain. When she ran into his arms, he whispered, "You showed them, Lily, you showed them everything." She smiled, resting her head against his chest. "I didn't show them," she said softly. "The music did." As they walked out of the grand hall later that night, the city lights reflected off the windows, and the sound of clapping still echoed in the distance. For Lily, the world had become much bigger, but the piano, her small notebook, and her father's smile were still the things that meant the most. She didn't know where the next song would take her. Maybe another city, another stage, another dream. But as long as she had music, she knew she would never be alone, and so, while the world talked about the genius child who stunned the nation, Lily went back to doing what she loved most, sitting quietly by her piano, letting her heart speak in the language it knew best. The morning air was cool and soft as Lily sat by her window, her small hands wrapped around a warm cup of cocoa. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up slowly, and the sun painted the sky in soft streaks of orange and pink. For Lily, the day felt heavier than usual. The excitement of the National Music Festival still lingered, but she couldn't stop thinking about what was coming next. Today she would face the judges again, the same ones who had challenged her before, but this time in a private setting for a special evaluation. They wanted to see if she could perform the piece that no one, not even seasoned professionals, had been able to complete. Her father was bustling around the kitchen, trying to pack her bag for the day. He moved quietly, not wanting to disturb her thoughts, yet his face was filled with pride and a little worry. "Remember, Lily," he said gently, "this isn't a test for you. You've already proven yourself. Just let the music speak." She nodded, though her stomach fluttered nervously. She had practiced for weeks, but the piece she was about to play was known for breaking even the most confident pianists. It demanded speed, precision, and emotion all at once. Many adults had failed to complete it. The very idea that she, a small 8-year-old girl, could even attempt it made her heart pound. The ride to the music hall was quiet. Lily gazed out the window at the passing fields, trees, and occasional houses. She wondered what the judges were thinking. Would they take her seriously this time? Or would they still see her as a child trying something far beyond her reach? Her father reached over, gently squeezing her hand. "You'll do fine," he said softly. "No matter what happens, you've already made them see your heart." The hall was familiar, yet different this time. It felt heavier, almost serious. The judges were already seated behind their long table, papers and pens in front of them. They looked at her with a mix of anticipation and disbelief. Some still had faint smiles from her previous performance, while others carried a small frown, perhaps expecting her to fail. She approached the piano slowly, each step echoing slightly against the polished floor. Her white dress swayed gently with every move. When she reached the bench, she paused and took a deep breath, letting her fingers hover above the keys. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath with her. The head judge, a man with silver hair and a thoughtful expression, nodded for her to begin. Lily closed her eyes. The hall was silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. The judges watched carefully, their pens poised, ready to note any mistake. Then she began. Her fingers moved across the keys with a precision that seemed impossible for someone her age. Every note was exact, every jump perfect. The opening melody was delicate but confident, like a whisper that slowly grew into a commanding voice. The judges leaned forward instinctively, unable to look away. They had heard professionals stumble on this very piece, yet here was a child playing it flawlessly. The middle section approached, the part everyone had failed at before. It was fast, filled with jumps across octaves with complex timing and sudden changes in rhythm. Even adults had dropped their hands in frustration when attempting this part. But Lily's hands moved as if guided by some invisible force. Each chord hit precisely, each note ringing clear and sharp. The judges exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from disbelief to astonishment. One whispered to the other, "How is this possible?" The audience, though small and composed mostly of staff and a few music enthusiasts invited to watch, held their breath. It was as if time itself had slowed. Lily's small frame seemed to disappear behind the sound she was producing. The piano keys blurred beneath her fingers, yet the melody remained perfectly controlled, perfectly alive. Her father, sitting quietly at the back, felt a lump in his throat. He had always known she was talented, but seeing her perform under such pressure was overwhelming. He could see the years of practice, the countless nights of persistence, the sacrifices, all reflected in every note. Then came the climax of the piece, the section no one had ever completed. It was known as the impossible passage. Professionals had tried it repeatedly and failed, often pausing mid-performance, frustrated and embarrassed. Lily approached it with calm determination. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look at the sheet. Her fingers simply moved as if they remembered the notes by heart, as if they belonged to her in some way no one could explain. 3 seconds. It took her only 3 seconds to play the section perfectly. Each note landed cleanly. Each chord resonated with power and emotion. The judges blinked, unsure if their eyes were deceiving them. One judge leaned forward, squinting at the keys, trying to figure out how a child could accomplish what they had failed to do themselves. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, as if some unseen dam had broken, applause erupted. It started small, a few claps, and then grew louder, filling the hall with excitement and awe. The judges, now completely amazed, stood up one by one. Their pens fell to the table. The chief judge, normally reserved and strict, walked toward Lily with a wide smile. "You did it," he said, his voice soft but filled with wonder. "You actually did it." Lily looked up at him, a little shy, a little surprised by the praise. I just listened to the music," she said quietly. The man shook his head, still smiling. "Listening doesn't explain this. This is more than talent. This is genius." The other judges nodded in agreement. Their expressions carried a mix of humility and astonishment. They had been in the music world for decades, yet none of them had witnessed anything like this. They had challenged her with the impossible, and she had not only met it, she had surpassed it. After the applause had settled, the judges began asking questions. "Where did you learn this piece?" one asked. "I taught myself," Lily said softly. "I watched videos, listened carefully, and practiced every day." The judges looked at each other, impressed and perhaps a little ashamed. "By yourself?" another asked. She nodded. "Music tells me what to do. I just follow it." For the next hour, the judges studied her performance, asking her to repeat certain passages, testing her accuracy and control. She played each section flawlessly, showing not just technical skill but emotion, understanding, and maturity far beyond her years. Every note seemed alive. Every melody carried a story. Outside the hall, word of her achievement had already started to spread. Reporters had been waiting for news, and soon, clips of her performance began to circulate online. Social media exploded with awe and admiration. People from different countries shared the video, calling her the 8-year-old who conquered the impossible, and a prodigy beyond belief. Despite the growing fame, Lily remained calm. She didn't play to impress anyone or to win awards. She played because it was a part of her, because it was the way she expressed herself when words were not enough. After the evaluation, her father walked with her through the quiet halls of the building. She held his hand tightly, still processing what had just happened. "Papa," she said softly. "They said I did what no one else could, but it felt like the music was helping me. Not me helping the music." Her father nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "That's because it is," he said. "Music doesn't belong to anyone. It flows through those who are ready to listen." As they left the hall, the city seemed brighter somehow. The sun shone on the streets, reflecting off windows and cars, and Lily felt a warmth in her chest. She knew this day would change everything. Invitations to perform at other concerts, letters from music schools, and opportunities she couldn't even imagine would soon follow. But for her, the real reward was different. It wasn't the praise or the recognition. It was the feeling she had while playing, the connection to something greater, something that let her express herself without fear or doubt. She knew that as long as she could play, she would always find her place in the world. That evening, back at home, Lily returned to her small living room piano. She didn't touch the keys to impress anyone. She didn't think about judges or fame. She simply played for herself, for the joy of music, and for the memory of her mother who had loved it just as much. Her fingers danced across the keys, softly at first, then louder, pouring every emotion into the melody. She closed her eyes and imagined the hall, the judges and the audience applauding, but it didn't matter. In that moment, she was alone with the music, and it was enough. Her father sat nearby, watching silently. He didn't need to tell her how proud he was. She had already proven herself, not just to the world, but to herself. And as her music filled the quiet house, he knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The next days would bring more interviews, more videos going viral, and more invitations from distant cities. But Lily had learned something important. No matter how many people watched, no matter how difficult the challenge, as long as she listened to her heart, the music would always guide her. That night, as she lay in bed, the echoes of her own performance still ringing in her ears, Lily whispered softly into the dark, "Thank you for letting me play." And somewhere deep inside, she felt the quiet answer, "You were always meant to." Her journey had reached a point that most children could never imagine. She had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. But Lily knew, even as she drifted into sleep, that her journey was far from over. There were more pieces to learn, more challenges to face, and more hearts to touch with the music that lived inside her. And for the first time, she realized that the world wasn't a place too big or too overwhelming. With the piano beneath her hands and music in her soul, she could face anything, and one day maybe even change the world, one note at a time. The day after Lily's remarkable performance at the music hall, the world seemed to hum with excitement. News channels ran stories about the 8-year-old prodigy who had played a piece no professional could complete. Social media buzzed with clips and comments, people calling her a genius, a miracle, and even the child who conquered the impossible. Letters arrived at her home from schools, concert halls, and music academies around the country. Invitations poured in, offering her opportunities she had never imagined. Some offered scholarships, others free lessons, and a few asked her to perform at prestigious venues. Despite all the excitement, Lily remained quiet, thoughtful, and focused. Fame had not changed her. She still sat at her small piano in the corner of her living room every day, practicing, creating melodies, and losing herself in the music. But she began to realize that her life was changing in ways she had not expected. One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Her father opened it to find 3 well-dressed men and 1 woman standing there. They introduced themselves as judges from an international music competition. They had seen the video of Lily's performance online and had come personally to invite her to participate in their prestigious contest. The competition was known to be one of the hardest in the world, reserved for professional pianists, many decades older than her. Lily stared at them in silence, her heart pounding. The judges, noticing her hesitation, smiled gently. "We understand this is sudden," one said, "but we believe your talent deserves recognition on a global stage. You are welcome to participate if you wish, but there is no pressure. We only wish to meet the young pianist who captured the world's attention." Her father, though proud, looked concerned. "It's a long trip," he said softly. "Are you sure she's ready?" Lily's fingers twitched slightly, a familiar feeling she had known before stepping onto the stage. She had faced nervousness before and overcome it. She took a deep breath and looked at the judges. "I want to try," she said softly, her voice steady. And so, a few weeks later, she found herself boarding a plane with her father. They flew to the city where the international competition was being held. The streets outside the airport were bustling, filled with towering buildings, bright lights, and a constant hum of activity. The city was overwhelming, loud and full of people moving quickly in every direction. Lily clutched her father's hand as they navigated the crowd, feeling small in the middle of it all. When they arrived at the competition hall, Lily could hardly believe her eyes. The building was enormous, filled with grand pianos and concert halls that seemed bigger than the ones she had ever seen. Competitors were arriving from all over the world, each carrying themselves with confidence and determination. They were older, taller, and dressed formally, their expressions serious and focused. Some had personal coaches with them. Some had assistants carrying sheet music, and some were quietly practicing in corners, fingers gliding over portable keyboards. Backstage, Lily felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never been among so many talented musicians before. Some of them looked at her curiously, whispering to each other. Some smiled politely while others seemed skeptical. How could a little girl from a small town compete with professionals who had trained their entire lives? Her father knelt beside her. "Remember, Lily," he said gently, "you've faced impossible challenges before. This is just another stage. Play with your heart and nothing else matters." Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. The judges were waiting, ready to test her in front of the international audience. She walked slowly toward the grand piano set in the center of the stage. The spotlight shone brightly, making her small figure look even smaller in comparison. The audience was enormous, filled with critics, music lovers, and professionals from every corner of the globe. Cameras recorded every detail, the hum of anticipation hanging in the air. She sat on the bench, adjusting the height slightly so her feet could reach the pedals. She placed her hands over the keys, pausing for a moment as she closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to vanish. She could hear nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat and the soft whispers of music she had imagined countless times. When she began, the sound was gentle, delicate, and precise. The opening notes floated through the hall like a soft breeze, capturing the attention of everyone present. The judges leaned forward, their expressions a mix of curiosity and amazement. They had heard many incredible performances in their lives, yet Lily's playing had a quality they could not ignore. The piece she had chosen was one she had been practicing in secret, a composition known for its difficulty, speed, and emotional depth. Her fingers moved across the keys with confidence and grace. Every chord, every note was executed perfectly. The audience was silent, captivated by the sound. The hall seemed to shrink as the music filled every corner, connecting everyone in the room to a single, unspoken story. As she reached the middle section, the part that demanded incredible speed and precision, her fingers flew over the keys. Even the most experienced judges leaned closer, astonished by the accuracy and clarity of her playing. The passage that had broken many professional musicians before now flowed effortlessly under her hands. 3 seconds. That was all it took for her to complete the most difficult part. The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment before the melody continued seamlessly into the final section. The judges exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock and admiration. They had expected her to struggle, but she surpassed all their expectations. The sound was flawless, the tempo perfect, and the emotion behind the music was undeniable. They had challenged her with a piece that professionals failed to master, yet she had performed it with a maturity far beyond her years. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the hall was silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted in applause. People stood, clapping, cheering, and some even whistled in amazement. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for the world to see. Lily blinked, overwhelmed, but a small smile appeared on her face. She had done what she had come to do. The chief judge, a distinguished man with silver hair, walked toward her. "Young lady," he said, his voice steady but filled with awe. "You have not only played perfectly, but you have done so with heart, soul, and courage. We have never seen anything like this." Another judge added, "Your performance has shown us that age is not a barrier to greatness. You have set a new standard for everyone here." Lily felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had practiced for hours, dreamed for months, and worked hard every day. Yet she never thought of herself as better than anyone else. For her, playing was not about winning or impressing others. It was about sharing the music inside her. After the performance, she was invited to a private room where the judges asked her about her process. They were curious how a child could master such a complex piece alone. "I just listened to the music," she said softly. "I imagined how it felt, and I practiced until I could follow it." The judges nodded, impressed. They had expected technical skill, but what they saw was far beyond that. It was passion, understanding, and the ability to communicate feelings through music. They realized that Lily's talent was not just natural ability. It was her heart guiding her hands. Word of her performance spread quickly. Videos of her playing circulated on social media, and news channels around the world shared her story. People were inspired by her dedication, humility, and talent. Letters and messages came from musicians, teachers, and fans who had never met her, but felt moved by her music. Even with all the recognition, Lily remained grounded. She continued to practice daily, focusing on improving herself rather than seeking applause. She found joy in small details. The sound of a perfect note, the way a melody could evoke emotion, and the simple act of sitting at her piano and creating something beautiful. Her father watched her quietly, amazed at how she handled everything. He had feared that fame might overwhelm her, but Lily had a maturity that balanced her innocence. She knew who she was, what she loved, and why she played. In the following weeks, she received invitations from more music academies, concert halls, and festivals. People wanted to teach her, perform with her, and share her talent with the world. She was offered scholarships, mentorships, and even the chance to record her own music. Yet through all of this, she never lost sight of what mattered most: the connection between her fingers and the keys, between her heart and the music. Every performance, no matter how big or small, reminded her why she had started in the first place, to play from her soul. One evening, after another successful day at the competition, Lily returned to her hotel room and sat quietly at a small piano in the corner. She closed her eyes and began to play. The room was empty, the world outside distant, and yet the sound felt larger than life. She played not for judges, not for fame, but for herself, for her father, and for the memory of her mother who had always loved music. When the last note faded, she opened her eyes and smiled softly. No matter how many stages she played on, how many people watched, or how far she traveled, she knew the music would always be hers. It was a language that spoke louder than words, a story told without speaking, and a connection that reached anyone who listened with their heart. That night, as she lay in bed, Lily whispered to herself, "I will keep playing no matter what." And deep inside, she felt a quiet strength, a certainty that the music would guide her through every challenge, every stage, and every audience she would ever face. The world had seen her genius, her courage, and her heart. But Lily knew that her journey was only beginning, and as long as she could sit at her piano and let her soul speak through the keys, she would always find her place, her purpose, and her own kind of magic. The audience in the grand hall rose to their feet, clapping until their hands turned red. The little girl stood quietly beside the piano, her hands folded in front of her. She wasn't smiling out of pride. She was smiling because she had done what she loved most. The sound of the piano still echoed inside her head like a gentle wave fading into the distance. The judges, who only moments ago had doubted her, sat frozen. One of them finally stood and removed his glasses, staring at her with disbelief. Another judge whispered something to his colleague, but no one could hear what was said. It didn't matter. Everyone in that hall had witnessed something unforgettable. A child had played a piece considered almost impossible, and she did it with grace and emotion that no one expected. Backstage, her parents hugged her tightly, their eyes wet with tears. They didn't care about trophies or medals. All they cared about was that their little girl was happy. The mother whispered softly, "You did it." But the girl shook her head gently and said, "I just played what I felt." That night, the video of her performance began to spread online. Someone from the audience had recorded it on their phone, and by morning it was everywhere. Musicians around the world were sharing it, talking about the mysterious little girl who played an impossible piece in seconds. People wrote comments saying her playing didn't sound human. It sounded like pure emotion, like the piano itself was speaking through her fingers. Soon, reporters started visiting their small home. Cameras, microphones, and flashes filled the room, but the girl didn't seem bothered. She just sat near her piano, ready to play again if someone asked. When a reporter questioned how she learned the piece so quickly, she answered honestly, "I just listened." It wasn't arrogance. It was the truth. She didn't know how to explain the way her mind worked. Music simply made sense to her. Music schools and famous conductors began sending invitations. Letters arrived from countries her parents had only seen on maps. Some promised scholarships, others offered big stages and opportunities. Her parents felt both proud and scared. They didn't want their daughter to lose her innocence in the rush of fame, so they agreed to let her continue, but only if she still had time to be a child, to laugh, to play, and to live a normal life. When she returned to school, her classmates treated her like a celebrity at first. They asked her to play during lunch breaks, and teachers proudly spoke about her to visitors. But she remained the same quiet girl who liked sitting by the window, drawing little piano keys on her notebook. Sometimes she played for her friends, Not the complex pieces that made her famous, but small tunes that made them smile. Months passed, and her performance continued to inspire others. Many parents enrolled their children in music lessons after watching her video. People started believing again in the idea that true talent could come from anywhere, even from a small town with an old piano in the corner of a room. Despite all the attention, she stayed away from fancy concerts for a while. Her parents noticed she liked playing for people who really listened, not for those who wanted to record her or compare her to others. One evening she asked her father, "Do I have to play big songs all the time?" He smiled and said, "No, play what makes you happy." That answer stayed with her, so instead of chasing fame, she started performing in hospitals, schools, and community centers. She played gentle music for children who were sick, for elderly people who missed their families, and for anyone who needed comfort. Sometimes she didn't even bring her own piano. She just used whatever was there. Her music wasn't about showing skill anymore. It was about sharing kindness. People who listened said there was something healing about the way she played. Even when she didn't speak, her music seemed to understand what others were feeling. In one hospital, an old man who hadn't spoken in days began humming along with her tune. Nurses cried quietly in the hallway. The girl didn't know why people cried. She only knew that her music made them feel lighter. As years went by, her name became known in many places, but she still preferred small crowds. She avoided interviews and award ceremonies. When people asked why, she said softly, "Music doesn't need trophies." Her parents supported her choice completely. They often reminded her that real success wasn't about fame. It was about staying true to her gift and her heart. The judges who had once doubted her invited her back years later for another event. They wanted her to perform again, this time as a special guest. She hesitated, but finally agreed, not to prove anything but to thank them for the challenge that started her journey. When she walked on stage again, now a little older but still humble, the audience remembered her from that unforgettable day. The judges stood up to greet her with respect. Before playing, she looked at them and said softly, "That day you gave me a hard piece to test me. But that challenge helped me find myself, so thank you." The hall fell silent again as she placed her hands on the piano keys. She didn't play the same difficult piece. Instead, she performed a new melody she had written herself, a gentle tune that spoke about courage, kindness, and forgiveness. The audience listened without moving. By the time she finished, even the judges had tears in their eyes. After the performance, she walked off the stage quietly, smiling the same way she had all those years ago. Reporters asked her for a statement, but she simply said, "Music is my way of saying thank you." Then she turned and left, heading straight back to the small piano at home that started it all. Back in her room, the same one with faded wallpaper and the smell of old wood, she sat down to play. The keys were a little worn out and some didn't sound perfect anymore, but she loved them. She began to play softly, filling the room with the same peace she felt as a child. Her parents stood at the door watching quietly. The world might have seen her as a genius, but to them, she was still their little girl who loved the piano more than anything else. As the years rolled on, her story continued to travel. Young pianists mentioned her as their inspiration, and her old videos were used in schools to show what passion could do. Even people who didn't understand classical music said that her playing made them feel something real. And that was exactly what she had always wanted, to make people feel. In interviews she rarely gave, she often said, "I don't play to be remembered. I play to remind people that beauty still exists." Those words stayed with many who heard them. She believed music could heal, bring peace, and connect people without needing any language. One afternoon, many years later, she returned to the same competition hall where it all began. It was quiet, almost empty. She walked up to the same piano where she had once stunned the judges. Dust had settled on the seats, but the memory of that night still lived in her mind. She placed her fingers on the keys and played the same hard piece once again, slowly this time, letting each note breathe. There was no audience, no cameras, no judges, just her and the piano. And in that silence, she felt completely free. As the last note faded, she smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you." She wasn't thanking the piano, the judges, or even the audience. She was thanking the journey itself, the challenges, the fear, the love, and the courage that shaped her. Outside the hall, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. She walked away quietly, blending into the crowd like an ordinary person, but those who knew her story would never forget her. She had shown the world that true genius wasn't just about speed or perfection, it was about heart. And somewhere, in a small home with an old piano that still sang beautifully, a melody kept playing. A melody that began with an 8-year-old girl and her dream to make the world listen.